There are moments in history when our stories begin to change before our systems do. The language we use to understand reality lags behind what we are already sensing. We continue to speak in the grammar of separation while living in a world that increasingly reveals itself as relational, entangled, and deeply responsive. When this happens, art often moves ahead of doctrine, not because art has answers, but because it knows how to ask better questions. Science fiction, at its best, has always functioned this way. Not as a prediction, but as a rehearsal. In this reflection, I moved through 3 science fiction films that entered my life at different moments: Arrival, Contact, and Interstellar. Not as objects of critique, but as shared symbolic language. They are not treated here as entertainment or speculation, but as mirrors through which questions about listening, contact, time, and guidance can be approached from another angle. What unites these stories is not spectacle, but posture. In Arrival, the central task is not conquest or defense, but learning a language that reshapes perception itself. The encounter changes the one who listens more than it changes the one who arrives. In Contact, the question is not whether we are alone in the universe, but whether we are capable of recognizing intelligence that does not arrive in familiar form. In Interstellar, the heart of the story is not the physics of wormholes, but the way love appears to move across dimensions we barely understand. In each case, the true threshold is internal. The frontier is not outer space. It is the human capacity to remain open without becoming unmoored. There is something quietly radical about these narratives. They refuse the old hero story of domination. They replace it with a different archetype, one rooted in listening, patience, and ethical restraint. The protagonists are not rewarded for certainty. They are rewarded for presence. They do not win by overpowering the unknown. They are transformed by entering into dialogue with it. This matters in a time like ours, where noise has become a substitute for signal. We live in an era of constant transmission, constant opinion, and constant reaction. We have unprecedented access to information, yet very little training in discernment. The result is not collective clarity, but collective overwhelm. Many people feel the world as a constant pressure on the nervous system. Everything is urgent. Everything is framed as a threat. Everything demands a response. These stories offer another rhythm. They suggest that not all contact is meant to be immediate, that not every signal is meant to be interpreted through existing frameworks, that sometimes the most intelligent response is to pause, to learn the grammar of what is emerging, to allow ourselves to be changed by what we encounter, rather than forcing it to conform to what we already know. There is also a quieter thread running through these films, one that often goes unnamed: the presence of guidance that does not disappear with death, the sense that a relationship continues beyond visible form. In Contact, the father figure returns, not as proof, but as reassurance. In Interstellar, the father becomes a signal woven into time itself. These are not sentimental devices. They point to a deeper human intuition that care is not bound by physical proximity, and that love may operate as a structuring force in ways we do not yet know how to measure. Whether one reads this spiritually, psychologically, or poetically, the implication is the same. We are shaped by the relationships we carry, even when those relationships change form. Memory, attachment, and meaning do not obey linear time. They move through us in ways that feel more like a field than an object. These films give us images for that experience, without reducing it to dogma. There is a reason such stories surface when all worldviews begin to strain under the weight of complexity. They prepare the imagination for a different kind of coherence, one that does not require uniformity to function. They suggest that humanity is being asked to mature beyond reflexive opposition, not into passivity, but into a form of responsiveness that can hold paradox without fragmenting. This is not about escaping the world. It is about learning how to meet it differently. To recognize that we are always already in contact, not just with what we can see, but with patterns, consequences, histories, and futures that exceed any single point of view. The threshold we are crossing is not technological. It is ethical and perceptual. It asks what kind of listeners we are willing to become. If these stories find you at this moment, it may not be a coincidence. Not because they contain secret messages, but because they speak to a collective condition that is becoming harder to ignore. We are standing at the edge of what our inherited frameworks can hold. Something in us already knows this. The question is whether we will meet what is emerging with fear, or with the quiet courage to learn a new language of relation. Sometimes, the invitation does not arrive as a revelation. Sometimes it arrives as a film, a story, a moment of resonance that lingers longer than expected, not to instruct, but to attune, not to persuade, but to remind us that the future will not be navigated by force alone, but by the quality of attention we bring to what is still unfolding.